Good evening. I'd like to call to order the Town Council meeting of Monday, February 7th, 2022 at 7:02 p.m. here in the McKinnon Council Chambers. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Law, Chapter 38, Section 18, and is extended into law on June 16, 2021, an act extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency. This meeting of the Town Council is being conducted via a hybrid method. Every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings as provided for in the order. Persons who would like to view this meeting while in progress may do so by the remote information noted below. We will post the record of this meeting on the town's website at https://www.ci.southbridge.ma.us as soon as we are able. A roll call vote is required for all votes taken under this order. First order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
Councillor Adams.
Present.
Councillor Catrona.
Present.
Councillor Daniel.
Present.
Councillor Dow.
Present.
Councillor Jovan. Councillor Lazo.
Present.
Councillor Marchetti.
Present.
Councillor Ryan.
Present.
Councillor Steves.
Present.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We have 9 present. We have a full house. Item number 3, consider and accept the Town Council meeting minutes of Monday, January 24, 2022.
So moved. Second.
Any additions, corrections, deletions, amendments?
Mr. Chairman, couple of quick things.
Council Steves.
There have been spelling mistakes. Item number 7, Cosgrove has an E in it. And item number 19, Joe Hewlick's name is consistently misspelled. It should be H-U-L-Y-K. That's all I have.
Anyone else? Very good. Roll call.
Councillor Adams.
Yes.
Councillor Catrona.
Yes.
Councillor Daniel.
Yes.
Councillor Dow.
Yes.
Councillor Jovan. Yes. Councillor Lazo.
Yes.
Councillor Marchetti.
Yes.
Councillor Ryan.
Yes.
And Councillor Steves.
Yes.
Very good. Subcommittee reports. General Government, Councilor Ryan.
We currently have no meetings scheduled. There are a couple items on the agenda for tonight, and including an item that fast-tracked past my subcommittee. I will discuss those items when they come up. Thank you.
Very good. Department of Public Works, Councilor Marchetti.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had some family issues to deal with, so Councillor Adams ran the meeting. Thank you.
Very well. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just 2 agenda items tonight for DPW. They're number 18 and 19 on tonight's agenda, and I'll discuss those along with Ms. Blakely and the Town Manager when they get to it. Thank you.
Very good. Education and Human Services, Councilor Jovan.
I had no meeting. There is one item on the agenda. Item number 11. It's a normal course of business, so that was put back directly up to council. No meeting scheduled at this time.
Very good. Planning and Development, Councilor Adams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, we had a meeting on February 3rd, 2022. Agenda items number 9 and 10 are on there. Our next agenda P&D meeting is scheduled for February 10th, 2022. That's to amend some of the zoning maps. Thank you.
Very good. And Protection of Persons and Property, Councilor Lazo.
No meeting scheduled at this time, no report.
Thank you very much. Chairman's announcements. I have one announcement this evening. I am pleased to announce that there will be a COVID-19 vaccine clinic on Saturday, February 19th from 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. in the Southridge Community Center at 153 Chestnut Street. This clinic is brought to you by the Southbridge Board of Health in partnership with the Southbridge Community Center and Purple Shield Medical. The Pfizer vaccine will be available for first, second, or booster doses. Visit the Health Department's page on the Town of Southbridge website to find a link to pre-register. Walk-ins will be accommodated, but on a first-come, first-served basis. And that's all I have for announcements. Next is Town Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to share with you, we did have our bi-weekly meeting today on COVID-19 with department heads, the Southbridge Public Schools, as well as Harrington Hospital. Mr. Pelletier gave his update and indicated that they recently had 2,000 people tested. However, we're still seeing a relatively high positivity rate here in Southbridge of 23%. But he did note that the pattern is starting to drop off. They had been seeing a number of cases in the low 20s to high teens, and recently that dropped down to the single digits. So he recommended we wait another 2 weeks to determine whether or not we lift the mask mandate here in Town Hall till we get a steady flow of people in single digits. He indicated that he's going to be getting an additional 2,000 test kits, which he'll disseminate as he did previously through various organizations here in the town. And he did want to remind everybody that he has 200 doses for the clinic that the chairman just mentioned. Walk-ins will be taken, but the preference would be to pre-register, which you can do through the health department website. I did previously update the council that I am looking, after the departure of Mr. Canoyer, how to proceed forward with IT. I did get an email from Councilor Marchetti. I have met with the school. We did talk about some possibilities for sharing. I also met with our managed service provider, and unfortunately the cost to get a contractor to come in just for 1 day a week is going to be cost prohibitive. So speaking with some of my department heads who have specialized IT needs, I think between the stipend that we had for Mr. Canoyer, as well as some of these other smaller IT budgets, we can pull those resources together and look for someone that we could have in-house to do some of our IT services. I will be formally putting that together for the budget, but I may have to bring somebody in, at least on a temporary basis, as I said before. But I tried to work something out with our managed service provider, but the costs it would be just as expensive to hire somebody full-time 5 days a week as it would to get one of these outside services to send somebody in 1 day a week. I also want to note that just over a week ago, Chairman Daniel and I were invited guests to participate at the Massachusetts Fire Academy in Stowe. Our own Chief Paul Normandin graduated from the Chief Fire Officers Program. It's a 14-week program that focuses on fire chief level education, helping him to improve officers and their ability to lead and manage personnel within the department. He was one of a handful of distinguished senior officers that completed this program. And this is on top of some of the work that he's been doing throughout the pandemic. Right at the beginning of the pandemic, he had completed his associate's degree with an outstanding cum of 3.73. Shortly after that, he tried to get into his firefighter 1 and 2, but as we all know, the pandemic kicked in, which prohibited his ability to go forward. But he did enroll in his bachelor's program, which has afforded him the opportunity to complete quite a few certificates from the National Fire Academy. And as courses came up, one of them of which was the Chief Fire Officers Program, he did enroll in that in an ongoing effort to get all of his training completed. So I want to congratulate him and thank him on the hard work. I did send out or give a brief update on the Municipal Vulnerability Program, and I did send some emails to the council. I know Councilor Steves had some questions, and I just wanted to give a brief update this evening. Mr. Rumsey, well, I should start by saying the Municipal Vulnerability Program is a grant program which is available to communities to address the ongoing issues of planning and resilience for climate change. And there's two components to the MVP program. One is an action grant, and the first is a planning grant. Before you can get money for actions, you have to go through the planning process. We've already applied and received that grant. Following the guidance of the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs, Mr. Rumsey had put together what they require is a core team, usually the leading department heads in the community. Councilor Steves had inquired about that. I think it would be prudent, Mr. Chairman, if you or a designee from the council comes and partakes in the initial core team meeting. I also think it would be prudent if I participated, but there are going to be stakeholders, primarily the department heads. That meeting will be on February 18th. It will be remote. But at that time, we'll be meeting with the consultant, which is paid for by the grant, to go over the needs of the community. And at that time, once we develop what the community's needs are, we would make a presentation, we will share it with the council. That would be submitted back to the state so that we can move forward and get money to actually address the needs of the town. And dealing with climate change, adaptation, and resilience isn't always what everybody thinks. In my last town, we looked at getting generators for cooling stations or for shelter in the winter, because you're having a variety of different impacts in a community. Not every community is the same. Some are coastal. We happen to have the dam, the river here. We've had tornadoes in the past. So it may not just be people thinking alternative energy to deal with climate change. It could be other things, as I say, generators, different types of equipment that we may need to handle a disaster. So the idea is you get your department heads together, other stakeholders, members of the council, and we discuss what's in the best interest of the community to help us deal with this changing environment. And as we all know, in the last year, we've seen a variety of different weather in this community, which has had an impact on our roads, our citizens, some of our buildings here. So I think it would be prudent to have Mr. Rumsey come in at the 28th after we've met with the consultants so he can share with the council what was discussed and what some of the ideas were. So I would strongly urge you to submit a name or two that you would like to participate, and then we can have a formal presentation on the 28th when we come back. And two other last-minute items, or one, I just want to update you that we did do a second poll on the late nights here at the town hall. The first time we accidentally put in Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, the existing night. We did put out a second poll. The participation wasn't as high as the first. Tuesday did come out as the winner, but what I think I'd like to do is, come back with some suggestions. There was some concern among some of the town hall folks about changing the night. I would like to get a little bit more feedback from staff on how to best present a plan for a trial basis. I said for 6 months to look at what night would be the best for subcommittees and for our late nights. So we're continuing to gather information on that front, and I'll come back with a suggestion on the 28th. And at that point, Mr. Chairman, that does conclude all of my announcements for this evening.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Manager. Item number 7, presentations. Back when the town manager was hired, one of his charges was to find opportunities for us to recognize residents of Southbridge, or just help us to recognize Southbridge's past and its present, working toward its future. As a result, I have a proclamation tonight with the help of the town manager. So I'd like to thank him for the work he did on this. This is a Town of Southbridge proclamation. Whereas, during Black History Month, we celebrate the many achievements and contributions made by African Americans to our economic, cultural, spiritual, and political development. And whereas Black History Month grew out of the establishment in 1926 of Negro History Week by Carter G. Woodson and the Association for the Study of African American Life and History. And whereas the 2022 national theme for the observance is Black Health and Wellness, and we'll celebrate the contributions and breakthroughs of Black professionals, as well as speaking to the cultural richness of those non-traditional health and wellness practitioners. And whereas the observance of Black History Month calls our attention to the continued need to battle racism and build a society that lives up to its democratic ideals. And whereas the town of Southbridge continues to work toward becoming an inclusive community in which all citizens, past, present, and future, are respected and recognized for their contributions and potential contributions to our community, the state, the country, and the world. And whereas the town of Southbridge is proud to honor the history and contributions of African Americans in our community throughout our state and nation. Now therefore, in recognition of African Americans, past and present, in our community, the Town Council of Southbridge, Massachusetts does hereby proclaim February 2022 to be Black History Month. We encourage all citizens to celebrate our diverse heritage and culture and continue our efforts to create a world that is more just, peaceful, and prosperous for all. Thank you very much, Mr. Manager. Well done. Agenda item number 8, Citizens Forum. Are there any citizens that wish to address the council tonight on an issue that is not on the agenda? Very good. Moving on. Agenda item number 9. Vote to approve the Economic Development Administration's, EDA, American Rescue Plan Administration's, ARPA, Travel, Tourism, and Outdoor Recreation Grant application to design and construct a rail trail approved January 24, 2022, not to exceed $1.7 million, and allow the town manager to sign required paperwork related to the application.
So moved.
Second.
Councilor Adams?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, this came to the Planning and Development Subcommittee meeting on February 3rd, 2022. It was voted on 3-1-1. Councilor Marquetti had to step in as far as one of the voting members as well, and I appreciate it, as some of the subcommittee members were a little bit late, excused late, but that's it. I'll pass that on to Ms. Dean or Town Manager if you'd like.
Thank you for allowing us to come to you again related to the EDA, ARPA, Travel, Tourism, and Outdoor Recreation grant application. If, Mr. Town Manager, you'd be willing to share your screen, we do have a workup of numbers for which our consultant BSC group will be able to walk us through, or through which our BSC consultant will be able to walk us. If we can make that much bigger. Just to give you a quick summary, we came to you on January 24th. The town approved applying for the EDA ARPA grant to design and construct the rail trail for up to $5.6 million. The notice of funding states that we are allowed to apply for 100% of the funding. We proceeded with our next action item, which was a call with the Northeast rep for the EDA grants. The EDA rep advised for us to make the grant more competitive, we need to consider a 20% match, and we need to reduce the scope. At that time, they'd seen 145 applications come in before the deadline had even come upon us. And so knowing that the breadth of competition nationally for us was so great, they're trying to position us as best possible to be able to be competitive. At that time, there were no other applications from Massachusetts. However, even in light of that, they felt like asking for $5.6 million was far too large an ask. They asked us to scale down the grant to somewhere between $1.5 million and $3 million to make the grant more competitive, and again, to make a 20%, they actually said a 20 to 30% match. We therefore all put our heads together as quickly as possible and devised a strategy to be able to continue to pursue the rail trail end to end, our first and foremost priority. As the comfort level for the DPW director is, if you're going to incur the liability of the rail trail, you want to make sure you construct it end to end at that time. And so with the priority of end-to-end and meeting those the DEP best management strategies or practices for soil along the rail beds, we worked with BSC Group to reduce some of the costs, to try to get credit, quote unquote, for some of the match from existing projects that are being funded elsewhere, and also look at where we could do any forced labor accounts or forced account labor contributions from the town in kind. And as well, can we potentially secure funds through the governor's office? And so we've been working very hard to get that commitment from the governor's office. To date, we have not gotten any commitment from them. And so here's where we are. If, Jeff, you want to go ahead and walk through the numbers, I hope you'll consider this motion tonight.
Good evening. Thank you, Peg. It was a great introduction. It's nice to be here again. Peg summarized things very well. We were fortunate to get advice from the local rep for the Economic Development Administration, federal agency, so the EDA. And through her advice, as Peg mentioned, we did trimmed down the budget and tried to get creative in coming up with a local match. And it might be a bit hard to see on the screen, but what we did was to bring down the overall cost of the project, but still be able to connect from Westville all the way down to Dudley. We actually eliminated a portion of the previous cost to cover the trail from Westville to the West Street School. As you may know, there is a trail there now. It makes that connection, so the thought was we could hold off on that section of the trail, hold off upgrading that. It would still be a connection from the school to Westville, and then we'd look for other grant sources to address that in the future. We also reduced the cost by eliminating a paved asphalt path for the whole distance. In previous discussions about the trail, there had been talk about having a stone dust surface or a paved surface. We priced it as a paved surface the whole distance with the idea that if the community wanted a stone dust path, it fit in with the environment a little bit better. It was more consistent with what Dudley had done, et cetera. So we cut back quite a bit on the cost of what would be paved, knowing that the areas where we aren't going to pave, we would still have a very stable walking surface. So we cut back, one, to fit into their budget recommendations, and two, to really minimize the amount of local match that would be necessary because, as she advised, the EDA rep advised, coming in with a 20% local match would really strengthen your application. So by reducing the overall budget and then getting creative with how we could come up with that match, some of that match would come from, which is allowed, in-kind labor supplied by the town. And Heather mentioned that DPW has the equipment to do some of the initial, what's called grubbing and clearing along the pathway, to open it up and make it accessible for vehicles and get rid of some of the brush, et cetera, along the pathway. So that was a value of about $180,000. And then we also looked at the cost of projects already in the works, the improvement of West Street from Main all the way up to West Street School. And that project will include the addition of a shared use pathway as part of this rail trail connection. So originally we had that in our overall budget. We're still showing that as part of the budget, but we've removed it from what we're calling the EDA funded portion. And then the second connection that's already part of a project is when you redo that whole intersection of Hook, La Rochelle, Central, and Foster Street, there's a connection from Hook all the way over to Foster that'll allow safe movement of pedestrians and bicycles from Hook over to Foster. So we carried that cost in the overall cost, but showed that was being covered by another funding source. So it might sound a bit confusing, but bottom line is we're saying to the feds, this is a project of about $3.5 million. Of that, 20% is already being covered through other funding as part of other projects, that being West Street and that being the Hook La Rochelle connection. And then in addition, there's in-kind services and a local cash match of $400,000. That's another 20%. So we're trying to make the case that overall, the community is providing a 40% match. We're not sure they will accept the West Street and La Rochelle project as a match. So to be safe, we're requesting $400,000 in cash as the local match over and above the $180,000 in-kind labor from DPW. There's been a request to the state, to the governor's office, to help the town come up with that local match. But we're also asking you to consider that local match also, so we've got it covered one way or the other. And again, makes it a much stronger application and still gets you the trail connection from Westville to Dudley.
All set? Very good. Councilor Jovan.
Thank you. Through you, would it be possible, Peg, if you could send that to us so that we can actually see it, because I can't see it there?
Yes.
As a hard copy would be fine. My second question, if I may, I understand the local matches, and then we've done this with the airport, and, put it in, and then come to find out the feds will pay 100%. So sometimes you have to gamble a little bit to see a project through. Is there any way, and I had brought this up to Councilor Adams last week, thought process as to the town had done engineering on a portion of that section of rail trail and had gotten $1 million from the federal government for that. Is it possible to articulate that into the application that, while this, I see they want to see a hard cash match, but to add that to the grant to say, look, we've already invested in this as to design on some of this rail trail to the tune of $1 million. Is that part of the application or thought process to put that into the application?
I will certainly suggest it to the consultant who's drafting the application for us, being submitted tomorrow. They are using a lot of those strategies where, although the EDA is very strict about its technical definitions of matches, we are still trying to paint the picture of, though this may not meet the mark of their exact match, look at X, Y, and Z. And so that could certainly help our position, but it will not count.
No, I certainly understand that it may not count, but I mean, that should be part of the application that says, look how much money has been invested in this project already. Please consider that we have out of a $5 million project, we have 25% or 20% of it that we've already allocated to this project, and we need the additional money. I just think it would strengthen any application. I mean, I certainly support whatever strategy we go to see this project through. And again, I'll just reiterate what I said before, is we took a chance with the airport. I think it was $385,000, I think, that we had to put out as a 5% match. Fed said, okay, we're paying for all. That money came back to the town. To me, that's future seed money to say, okay, here's another project that we had earmarked money for, didn't have to spend it, so let's go in another direction and see what may happen. So I would support, this initiative. Thank you.
Can the control room change the view of the screen for me, please?
Mr. Chairman, it's probably me, and I probably have to take away Ms. Dean's ability to be a presenter.
Councilor Steves.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, through you to Ms. Dean. I noticed in your list it does not account for the section that's already been built going into the 169 project over on Northwest Duck Road. Can that be attributed to this project as well? Do you have a consultant?
Yes, actually, that is, we're going to mention that in the grant application. Any expenses that the town or the state has incurred prior to the grant application going in can't be counted as a match. But we certainly will are making note of that section that's already been built, and that the value of that section is not in our cost estimate, but it will be reflected as previous investment in the rail trail.
Also, so if I can clarify that there is a discussion that we had last time about the 5 million plus, and now you're looking for somewhere around 2/3 of that. How much of what we have, first of all, what happened with the grant total that they said that we could apply for? Why did it come back that now we can't do that? That seems a little bit like bait and switch to me.
I will just, okay, so I'll just give you what we heard from the Northeast EDA rep, who again represents, the Northeast and New England, of the X amount of funds that have been allocated for the grant. They're just looking at estimates of potential numbers going to each state, and they're saying that if we were asking for the 5.6, we're taking the bulk of what would go to Massachusetts. And so they wanted it to be a fairer process. They would like to see a couple of projects And so we don't want to risk not being funded versus going for too much. So, you know, we're trying to take her advice. And then with regards to the bait and switch, I don't know if you want to address that.
Certainly was not intended to be a bait and switch. After we met with you 2 weeks ago, the very following day, we met with the EDA representative, and she gave us very constructive feedback about what some changes we should consider to have a much more competitive grant application. One is to reduce the overall ask, and second is to come up with a way to show we had a match. The grant application guidelines clearly said, you know, here's the grant program. EDA is asking for a 20% local match, but it's not required if you can make the case that your community needs additional assistance, can't come up with the match, you have certain demographics and financial hardships. We were prepared to make that argument. She didn't tell us that wouldn't fly, for lack of a better word. She just said to make your grant type application much more competitive, you really need to find a way to come up. It would help you to come up with, if you came up with a way to show you had a local match for the project. So in order to lower the cost to be more within her range that she thought was going to be very competitive, again, we removed this section from Westville to West Street School. That was about a $500,000 expense there. We also reduced the amount of asphalt paving along the path. Portions will still be paved, but portions will become stone dust. That saved about another $1 million, and then that got us in the range of the $400,000 as a cash match so that we could show we had that 20% match using the cash and the in-kind services over and above the case we're going to make for the other 20%, which is part of West Street and the intersection. So I hope that answers your question.
If I could just clarify.
Okay, I wasn't you guys, which I was more aimed at the EDA, you guys. Because it seems like they have the government seems to have plenty of money for projects that don't benefit any of us, but when we actually look for real economic development projects, we get shaft. And I'm tired of it. Other than that, as I said in the past, I am very much in favor of this project. I do want to see this get done. I'm just upset with the constant game plan that seems to come down from Washington, strategy, that sort of things. But I'm still going to support what we try to figure out to do with this. That's all.
Any other councilors? Councilor Marquetti.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, through you. I did attend the subcommittee level, and I will repeat what I said at the time, that this is a classic bait and switch. The grant started off at $5.6 million, and the town council went ahead and voted for the rail trail to approve the $5.6 million in the application. And now after the vote, the Northeast EDA rep now says that that amount is too much and asked you to come down. You said she suggested $1.5 million to $3 million. You've come down to $3.5 million by eliminating everything that is not necessary for the trail. Ms. Dean, you suggested that the town funding for the full project or with a local match. Now, the town manager did agree with my assessment, said he wouldn't disagree that it seems to be a bait and switch. He also said that the Northeast EDA rep came back with a dollar amount and it was a shock, and no one saw this coming. He also called it a curveball. Ms. Dean said that it was a total shock, but they are trying to adhere to the EDA rep's suggestion. Now, the town manager said ARPA funds could be used under the lost revenue category for rail trail and suggested a $1.7 million matching grant using ARPA funds, and that's on the agenda tonight. I've been looking at what ARPA funds could be used for, and these are some of the things I think most residents in town would like us to take priority. I think at the top of the list is water and sewer infrastructure. A lot of residents tell me their rates are very burdensome and they'd like to see them reduced. I think this would help keep the rates low if we could use some of that ARPA money for water and sewer infrastructure. Road repairs directly related to water and sewer projects. Now, we have the West Street project. Some of the money could go for that. We have the South Street project. The money could go for that as well. And also broadband infrastructure, and we could increase Wi-Fi for every student in town, I would say. Some of the other things, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think could be used, ARPA money could be used for hiring more police officers, additional enforcement efforts to reduce crime, school-based social support, housing assistance, rental assistance, utilities, jobs, workforce training, clean energy projects, and public health. And I would say an argument could be made that curbside garbage collection would come under public health. I would argue that it could be made that way. I will also say one thing. There have been a lot of numbers that have been tossed around here over the course of the past 2 weeks. I heard 5.6 million, 3.6 million, between 1.5 and 3.5, 300 million, 1.7 million. It was 30%, 20%. Today I get an email saying 400,000. And sometimes I feel like I'm at a circus or something and somebody is spinning a wheel and saying, where will it land? It makes me think of that famous quote attributed to P.T. Barnum. I think you all remember that quote, "There's a sucker born every minute." And as it turns out, P.T. Barnum actually visited Southbridge in 1876. He brought a circus to town, and the circus never left. So I would say, at this point, to the councilors, I would stick to your demand for 5.6 million. I would stick to that. If the state wants us to take over that Providence and Worcester railroad line, then let them give us $5.6 million. Either that or let a private company take over. I talked to a private entrepreneur who wanted to put an actual rail car on the rails, so you wouldn't have to remove the trail line, the railroad line. So at this point, as I said before, I'm still not going to vote for this. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Council Jovan.
Thank you. First off, Mr. Chairman, I have no idea what's going on in this chamber here, because the people there speak and it blasts us out and echoes, yet I can't hear a word that Council Marchetti is saying to this council dais, and he's 20 feet away from me. I have no idea. This is a constant struggle week after week. I don't know what is going to be done to fix this, but the inability for us not to hear councilors speaking that are in the same room, it has to be fixed, because I have no idea what, outside of him calling something a circus and numbers, I have no idea. And I know we wear masks and everything, but it's not just the mask, and hopefully we can get this addressed, because respectfully, I'm sure he had very valid points, but I couldn't understand a word he said. So with that, secondly, I appreciate the previous speaker says there's some concerns with projects. But I'm not going to go down the path calling everything a circus. If you debate it, let's fix it and figure it out. And I do share those concerns. Is it 5.6? Is it 5.7? Where are we going? Previous matches and all that. The bottom line is this is a worthwhile project. I guess the question would be, we're voting on not to exceed $1.7 million, and there was these other numbers, which I would agree with Council Marchetti, what is what, and then a hard cash match of $400,000. One, there's nothing in the motion that says where that $400,000 is going to come from. So do we have through you to the town manager, if we were to say up to 1.7 million, and the application goes in with all these other amounts of different pockets, where are we earmarking the $400,000 from? That would be a question one.
Mr. Manager.
And I guess I'd like to hear the town manager's thoughts on this grant application as well, and how he believes that we should proceed respectfully. We heard from the economic, but what does the town manager think, and how does he recommend us proceed on this? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to Councilors Marchetti, Councilors Jovan, and all the councilors. You know, when I said the other week, when Councilor Marchetti said that this appeared to be a classic bait and switch, I said, you know, I'm not going to disagree with his assessment, but when you step back and look at it, I realize what they're trying to do is trying to give us guidance on how to better position our application. Now, what they think is best for Southbridge and what we think is best for Southbridge are two different things. In a perfect world, we would like 100% matching on $5.6 million to build that rail trail the way we want, end to end. But what we inferred, and as by all accounts it was a shock, that really to get our applications the attention that it deserves, there was two components. One, they thought our ask was too big, and two, they wanted a local contribution, which we didn't see coming. And they said at a minimum, a local contribution should look roughly at 20%, which on $5.6 million was $1.2 million. So that's where that number came from. They said to better our chances, we should put in a 30% contribution. That's where the $1.7 million came from. That was what we were talking at that time, and then in the ensuing days, we were scrambling, as Ms. Dean said. We've been writing letters and emails. Ms. Dean's done the bulk of it. I've been communicating with Senator Warren's office. She's been communicating with Senator Markey's office, Senator Neal's office. We had talked to the Lieutenant Governor when she was here for the opening of the Municipal Police Training Center, said she would hold open the opportunity to speak to us about getting some state funding. So we've been working with her scheduler and staff to try and get a meeting on short notice to talk about getting some money from them to be part of this local contribution. So in the meantime, BSC, Ms. Dean and I and others and Ms. Blakely have met at one point almost on a daily basis, twice a day, to come up with numbers that would achieve what the EDA rep was asking for, a lower ask, so something along the lines of $3.5 million. She wanted us to go down lower, around $1.5 million. So we were trying to accommodate their request to make sure that we get money. Yes, we could roll the dice and say, we're not going to give a local contribution, and we'll put in and just ask for the 5.6, and based on what we heard, our application isn't going to fly. So we wanted to present an option to the council as to, if we're listening to what the EDA rep says, what type of package do we have to put together to present this in a favorable light so that we can get some money and build a rail trail, which we've discussed, and I've discussed with Ms. Dean, and I've heard from several councilors from my interview in my 18 months here, that many people believe is a key to making Southbridge a destination and one of the pieces of the engine that will help generate more revenue for this town by bringing in visitors, motivating other people to invest in restaurants and other shops in town. So in order to honor those requests, we're trying to come up with options. And so basically you have, in my opinion, really two options. You can roll the dice and look for the 100% funding, and we were pretty much told that won't fly, or we look at lowering the dollar amount at the same time coming up with some type of local contribution, and that's the presentation that you heard from Ms. Dean and BSC this evening. When we were contemplating this last week, we were talking about using monies from the ARPA grant. It was asked last week, I think Councilor Catrona had asked me, I think I did the numbers here, I have them, but we have spent, to date, we've spent $950,000 on several different projects, leaving us a balance of just under $4.1 million. I did review the new overview of the final rule that came out last month on how to use ARPA funds, and as I indicated, there's a new calculation for lost local revenue which gives a standard allowance. Somebody might think it's analogous to if you do taxes to a standard deduction. But it basically says any community, that's a non-entitlement unit, which Southbridge is, can opt for this, and we can use up to $10 million, and we were only given $5.1 million for general government services. And to Mr. Marchetti's point, they give a general overview of what can be considered to be general government services, and I do have the page up to show. They give some guidance in the overview of what are general services, and they say they generally include any service traditionally provided by a government unless the Treasury has stated otherwise. And there is a list of ineligible expenses and prohibitions. We've talked about them before. You can't use this for certain repayment of debt, taxes, pension. But they give some examples, but it's not an exhaustive list. Construction of schools and hospitals, road building and maintenance and other infrastructure, health services, general government and administration staff and administrative facilities, environmental remediation, provision of police and fire and other public safety services, including the purchase of certain public safety vehicles. So some of the things that Mr. Marchetti said could be used for ARPA funds. When we first received the interim rule, given the dollar amounts and the local revenue calculations, we were limited to really 4 areas. With this new standard allowance, it appears that towns our size can take that money and pretty much spend it on anything that we feel would be appropriate, which would be a standard government service. They give no guidelines as to, at least that I saw so far, whether or not you want to use it on a one-time expenditure or reoccurring expenses. But I would always recommend that these are one-time monies and they should be used for one-time expenditures. And this is a one-time expenditure that we're looking at, and I think it's an important one. And we may not get this opportunity to fall in line again for some time. So you have this money, you have this opportunity, and to Councilor Jovan's point before, we did put up money to match for the FAA. That money was taken from stabilization. As I recall, when it was not used, it went back into stabilization. So I don't have Ms. Harnoy's on hand, but I know that we have a significant amount of money in stabilization at the moment. If you chose not to use the ARPA money, that's an available source at the moment. It's somewhat exchangeable because you could take from here, from ARPA for the moment, or you could take elsewhere because the ARPA money can be used on pretty much anything within the umbrella of government services. So to recap, we're trying to give options based on the feedback we received, and so that's where all the numbers came from, and I'm sure Ms. Dean or I could give you an exact explanation of each of those numbers. I do think it's a worthwhile endeavor. It was one of the charges that the staff and I were given to try and bring it to fruition. Yes, it is a bit of a curveball that we were told the next day after we were here that to enhance our application, we should lower the ask and throw in some of our own money, but we think it's an important feature that makes this town a destination and helps us move forward to attract other great things. And we've seen plenty of great things happening, which have been the catalyst for a lot of change. And I think this will be the key going forward for Southbridge.
Councilor Jovan.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Manager. Thank you for those points. I guess the last question I have through you would be, would this motion have to be, if we were to drop the overall cost of the project to the 3.5, 3.6, would this motion be amended that the not to exceed should be less than that? Because I would hate to say to the EDA, well, they said they would go up to $1.7 million of a 3.5, which would be 50%. So I guess through you to Councilor Adams, would we be amending that to reduce that not to exceed?
Councilor Adams.
Could I just assist?
Bill, please.
The only reason we picked the 1.75 because the other day we weren't sure which option we were going to take. And based on my experience back when I served as the backup town moderator, you could generally amend a number down but not up. So at that time, the 30% contribution on the full dollar amount of the project, the 5.6, would have been 1.7 million. So I suggested to Ms. Dean we put that there, and we can work backwards from that based on what the council so chose to do.
So just as a follow-up question, I guess through you. So the application that needs to be submitted by this week, I believe, We put in the, do we have to amend the also previous vote of a $5.6 million application to 3.5 with the match of, for technical aspects of this, or how is that? Well, I guess for comfort level, what is the bottom line that we are applying for, maximum application dollar amount, and what that match would be, I guess, would be my question, so that we're all clear. Thank you.
Ms. Dean.
Councilor Adams, would you like me to speak to this?
No, go ahead, Ms. Dean.
Okay, so my fault. I should have caught there were a few crucial words missing from this motion that didn't make it from subcommittee onto the town council agenda. That language was approved January 24th, 2022, insert, and consider recommending town council use ARPA funds towards a match of not more than 1.7 million. I apologize. So, for your total grant amount, you do not need to revise your prior motion. For your assurance, the application will be not more than 3.555596.20, which is all inclusive of projects happening outside of our funding, and our in-kind and cash match should the town council be willing to raise $400,000 using ARPA funds. So the motion is a request for, rather than that 1.7, it would be, and consider recommending town council use ARPA funds towards a match of not more than $400,000. Should the town consider that motion, accept those, should the town approve the motion, and in the future, we see funds come through from the state, for instance, through the Lieutenant Governor's office, et cetera, then, yeah, it would be offsetting whatever you may have already raised.
So I'll make a motion to amend this agenda item to that language, not to exceed 400,000, using ARPA funds. Thank you.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Councilor Adams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to clarify, that was my mistake when it came to the motion. It was not Ms. Dean. So I will I take responsibility for that. Also, the $1.7 million, obviously with the town manager and Ms. Dean has said before, that was something that we came up with at that time because we didn't know, but we also knew that there'd be more follow-through come Friday and Monday with more information from the state and the feds. So I appreciate all the hard work Ms. Dean and BSC Group has done on this whole thing. I just want to clarify that basically you're scratching out after 22. You're taking out and consider recommending town count, I'm sorry, after January 24th, 2022, use of ARPA funds towards a match of not more than $400,000. And finish up the rest about the town manager to sign required paperwork related to the application. I don't believe that was in there as well, was it?
No, it's in there. That's in the original motion. I was just
making sure it was inserted.
Yeah.
Okay,
inserted, yeah.
Thank you. All right. But I do want to thank them. I understand completely where Councilor Marchetti is coming from in a sense. It went from 5.6 to 3.5 to all these numbers that went around and stuff like that, but paying close attention, we kind of had an idea. Anything coming from the feds that sounds too good to be true sometimes in the state is the fact that, you know, we do have grants sometimes that come down and we have to match, the state matches it and the state requires that the town match it and all that kind of stuff. So I'm still for this. I understand that we may have to remove some of the items throughout the rail trail, but I'm hopeful that we can actually get this rail trail completed. It's been something that's probably been more scrutinized and brought up to me and in a positive way since I've been on the council. So I'm looking forward to this moving forward and hopefully that the town of Southbridge receives it from the feds. Very competitive grant. I believe there's only one grant out there for that, so hopefully we can get it. Thank you.
Councilor Steves.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to point out, while we're talking about this, I quickly took a look at the EPA's website just to give you some idea of what they're looking at, what we're looking at, kind of competing In the last they break it out into 5-day periods. So since January 24th, they've approved 3 projects funding worth about $6.5 million, with $4.9 million in matches. However, before that, they had 8 projects in these several days. There was $3 million to one single project, which is $300,000 in matches. And there were 2 other projects prior to that. One was $1.6 million, and another was $3 million with $3.4 million in matches. So they're all over the place in what they will actually fund and what they will actually demand for matches. It's pretty crazy looking at it. Just for your information.
Thank you. Sir.
Thank you very much. I just want to make one more point. Again, we're looking at cost estimates, and we back all the numbers that you have in front of you, but in the discussions we've had with the town and coming up with those numbers, you know, these are preliminary numbers, and we understand that whatever the grant is, whether it's us designing it or us advising the town, if you're working with another designer, if the intent is to design a project that works within the funding you have to get you from point A to point B. There are a lot of variables that you can take into consideration when you do the final design of this. The other thing is that under our current contract with the town and doing this feasibility study for the rail trail, it also calls for us to look at other funding sources. So this is not the end of it. When we deliver our final report, we will also be recommending to the town other potential funding sources that you could go after that may count as your match and help offset that $400,000, or may add to whatever grant you get, so to add either more, so it'll give you the ability to add even more amenities to the trail. So I just want to make it clear. I guess I don't want to be back here again with people asking, well, you said it was 3.5 and now you're up to 4 because you got some more money. Well, there's always other things that we could spend our money on if indeed we are able to, you were successful in getting additional funding.
Very good. Any other councilors? Council Lazo.
I agree with Councilor Marquetti. It's getting confusing. It was a straightforward grant, and now there are a lot of strings attached on if, maybe, almost. I'm an advocate for the rail trail. I don't have a problem with the project. I'm having a problem with all the numbers being thrown out tonight. And bottom line is, I don't think anybody's against the trail, but I think what someone's going to ask is matching funds. We've been dealing with matching funds on K Street, L Street, Airport. Every grant, most of the grants that we deal with has a matching fund. My thing is, there's 2 questions that come to mind. I'm not questioning the project. I'm questioning, 1, what is the matching number? And 2, are the taxpayers going to have, we're going to have to go back and get money from the taxpayers, whether it be the stabilization fund or some other fund. And there's going to be grants, other grants that we can apply for. What is the real deal right now as we sit here? Just give me one number where you're going to say, this is the cost of the trail and this is the matching fund. That's all I want to hear. I don't want to hear that you eliminated West Street and all that.
The cost of the trail is estimated at $3.555 million. And as part of the match, it would be a cash match not to exceed $400,000 from the town. And over and above that, that would be in-kind services provided through labor and equipment by DPW with an estimated value of $181,000.
Thank you.
Welcome.
All set? Anyone else? Very good. We have an amendment on the floor we need to vote on first. Very good. We have a motion and a second on that, so let's have a roll call vote on the amendment.
Counselor Catrona?
Yes.
Counselor Daniel?
Yes.
Counselor Dow?
Yes.
Counselor Jovan?
Yes.
Counselor Lazo,
Yes.
Counselor Marquetti,
No.
Counselor Ryan,
Yes.
Counselor Steves,
Yes.
and Counselor Adams.
Yes.
Very good. The amendment passes. We now have the motion back on the floor, the main motion. Roll call vote. I'm sorry, Mr. Manager.
All I want to say is the reason, if anybody's asking why we're also voting, the council's voting, because we received this as grant money from the federal government pursuant to Mass General Law. The administration and finances reminded everybody that it is a grant, and so whenever we expend grant monies, there has to be a vote of the council pursuant to Mass General Law 44, Section 53A. So that's why we're voting to make the local contribution from ARPA. It has to be voted on.
Very good. Okay, now the motion is amended. Roll call.
Counselor Daniel,
Yes.
Counselor Dow,
Yes.
Counselor Jovan,
Yes.
Counselor Lazo,
Yes.
Counselor Marquetti,
No.
Counselor Ryan,
Yes.
Counselor Steves,
Yes.
Counselor Adams,
Yes.
and Counselor Catrona.
Yes.
The motion as amended carries.
Good luck.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.
Item number 10, vote to approve applying for the Shared Streets and Spaces Grant funding for snow removal equipment to clear pedestrian ways and to paint priority crosswalks with more durable paint to include pavement treatment if allowed, and allow the town manager to sign required paperwork related to the application.
So moved.
Second.
Councilor Adams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you, that this motion is recommended unanimously by the subcommittee on February 3rd.
Any discussion? Councilor Lazo.
Just a quick question. It says snow removal equipment. Is this something that was on a capital improvement list that we needed?
We're looking at getting a Bobcat to basically allow us to do more sidewalk work in addition to the ones we already have. Right now, we are renting one Bobcat because we have to do all the snow removal within house forces, the day after our storms. So we split up into 4 teams. We're renting one currently, so this would be to get rid of the rental.
I'm not debating the need. I understand the need.
Yeah. I'm not really sure where it appears on our capital list. It's probably a couple years out.
Okay. The reason why I was asking is we had a big discussion over capital improvement with that ad hoc committee, and if there's money that can be had, is there a priority higher than the Bobcat? But I understand the need. I'm not debating the piece of equipment. I was just wondering.
And it's limited to just doing pedestrian ways, so kind of sandwiched into snow removal equipment for pedestrian ways is the
Okay.
way the grant reads.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Councilor Steves.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A quick question. Where the grant talks about where it talks about up to $200,000 for speed and for painting crosswalks, which I agree we need to identify that more clearly. Is there any way we can use some of that money to have plainclothes officers actually, serving at the crosswalks? Because people just ignore the crosswalks they are now. Even if they are seeing those lights that they have, we're installing and they ignore the flashing lights. And it would be nice to have a plainclothes officer standing there and actually be able to ticket these people every once in a while. Is it connected to be used that way? Heather?
I don't believe so. I don't believe police details and staffing are not allowed to be used with these funds, and they have to be expended by June 30.
That seems like an awful lot of spending for painting. How many of these crosswalks are we doing? Are they all over town, like all the crosswalks in town? Different ones or what?
So we're hoping that we will be able to do treatments to the walkways, not just the lining, but we're also looking at the lining paint that's going to last 5 years, which is going to decrease the amount of labor that we have to do year after year. no, we're probably not looking at all over town, but we still have to get quotes on how much that treatment costs and if we can use it. So we were looking at doing decorative treatments to make it more visible. We're not sure they're going to allow us, but just making the more visible paint lines and permanent will help us and have the benefit for us. And yes, we probably won't do 200,000, but we're going to try to maximize whatever we can in that grant.
Would it allow us to do, like, increase, like, do those little humps in the side, in the pavement that would slow cars down? Would that be allowed?
I don't think I understood what you were talking.
Like, setting up your pavement so that the crosswalks themselves are slightly raised to force the traffic to slow down? That's sort of what pavement treatment. The speed calming devices.
You can understand that?
I understand what you're saying. You're looking at doing raised table crosswalks.
Something like that, yes.
So raised table crosswalks have their own variety of problems, and when they're designed into roads that have it considered for drainage and other things, they can work, and they can work in certain locations, but we're not talking about redesigning our roads here. Raised tables really can play havoc with storm drainage big time. So and snow plowing and a whole bunch of other ideas. So plus they become ramps and things of that nature. So I wouldn't, that's not what we're going for here. We have to do things that are easy and quick. Painting, we can hire a contractor to go out and paint crosswalks. Easy, quick. And that's really what they're looking for. Easy, quick improvements, set cost savings for the towns too.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Very well, roll call.
Counselor Dow?
Yes.
Counselor Jovan?
Yes.
Counselor Lazo?
Yes.
Counselor Marquetti?
Yes.
Counselor Ryan?
Yes.
Counselor Steves?
Yes.
Counselor Adams?
Yes.
Counselor Catrona?
Yes.
And Counselor Daniel?
Yes. Very good, motion passes. Item number 11, vote to accept the fiscal year 22 Cultural Council grant from the Massachusetts Cultural Council to the Southbridge Local Cultural Council account in the amount of $20,000 for dates of service July 1st, 2021 through June 30, 2022.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. Councilor Jovan.
Thank you. Normally, cultural council items would come to EHS for a subcommittee. However, I would just, as we would always like to vet things through subcommittee, however, I would ask you to take note on the letter which was dated January 31st, requesting that this be submitted with all paperwork by February 11th. So therefore, that's why it went directly to council. Thank you. This is an annual allocation that we get every year from the legislature, so they use it for their cultural events. Thank you.
Any discussion? Very good, roll call.
Counselor Jovan?
Yes.
Counselor Lazo?
Yes.
Counselor Marquetti?
Yes.
Counselor Ryan?
Yes.
Counselor Steves?
Yes.
Counselor Adams?
Yes.
Counselor Catrona?
Yes.
Counselor Daniel?
Yes.
And Counselor Dow?
Yes.
Very good. Item number 12, vote to approve fiscal year 22 firefighter safety equipment grant from Department of Fire Services, DFS, in the amount of $10,244.78, and authorize the town manager to sign all related documents.
So moved.
Second.
Council Lasso? Nope.
No recommendation from subcommittee, straight to council.
Very good. Mr. Manager?
I have the chief here. I'm sorry, I was
Very good.
checking up on something
Okay,
that
I'm
was
just
asked a minute
going
ago.
around the rail, that's all. Chief, go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. This is our second time of getting this award from the Firefighter Safety Equipment Grant from the Department of Fire Services. Each year, as you very well know, we've gone through every grants that most grants that we can try to apply for, and we've been very successful. This was just another attempt here through EOPS and DFS to get some monies to purchase some equipment within the fire service and the EMS service. This year I did put in for APX portable radios, which is a Motorola brand. I will tell you that the costs of radios have increased quite a bit. This particular radio goes for $9,000 per radio. And also a bunch of batteries, associated batteries to go with this radio and some other older radios that we have. This is a good grant. A lot of other towns around here have received this grant. We use it for any other types of equipment that we need, but I felt that the radio at one of them at $9,000 was a good fortune to try to attempt to get the grant. So that's where we sit right now.
Very good. Councilors. Very good. Roll call.
Counselor Lazo?
Yes.
Counselor Marquetti?
Yes.
Counselor Ryan?
Yes.
Counselor Steves?
Yes.
Counselor Adams?
Yes.
Counselor Catrona?
Yes.
Counselor Daniel?
Yes.
Counselor Dow?
Yes.
And Counselor Jovan?
Yes.
Very good. Motion passes. Item number 13, vote to change the years of service of current lieutenant promotional process from 5 years to 3 years of actual service.
So moved.
Second.
Chief?
So, according to my memo, as I've sent it forward, this did not go to subcommittee with Chairman Lazo's blessings. So here I am tonight. What I need to explain in regards to this is that back in 2018, there was changes were made to the lieutenant and captain's promotional process. At the time, the memo and the process currently sits as it sits today. My reasoning to come to you today is to add change the 5 years of service to 3 years of actual service on the lieutenant's promotional process at this point. Back in 18, when we did the last promotional process, the lieutenants that were hired at that time, we expected them to be there for at least 5 to 7 to 8 years. With a recent retirement of one of our lieutenants, this brings this promotional process and this discussion up to the forefront. Currently, right now, 5 years and above in the fire service, in the fire department, we have 7 members that are able to take the test. But of those 7, there are actually only 2 or 3 of them that are qualified with the appropriate credentials for the lieutenant's position. My reasoning was currently to dropping of the years of service to 3 was because currently 2 members below 5 years are working out of grade, or they operate as a lieutenant or an acting officer when the lieutenant that is assigned to that shift is out on vacation or sick time. So I thought it was fair by dropping that to 3 years. The members that do have under 5 years that are currently operating in that role will have the ability to at least take the test. Trying to be fair in operating the department, this is kind of where we're at right now. I'm open for any questions that you may have.
Councilor Jovan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you I certainly understand the concerns of the fire chief and the requirements. And it's regrettable that we were not able to have a PPP. My strong recommendation would be that we do refer this back to PPP for further discussion, because I don't feel, I have a lot of questions about the whole process. No doubt there may be qualified individuals. I have some questions that I don't want to have a long debate this evening on this, but I would also ask for some additional information from the chief. Prior to me coming on council 4 years ago, the promotional process was adopted by that prior council. And we came on board as in July when they made the appointment for the lieutenant. I remember at that point, just 4 years ago, that there was a lot of conversation about the process by which promotions were done in the fire department, especially the lieutenant, and through the former town manager, as to process, as to the assessment and how things were weighted, because there were concerns about, okay, you had this, and this predates Chief Norman, and so he inherited this system. So that's why I feel it deserves a more robust discussion at the subcommittee level. The conversation at that time was we have an assessment, and you go through the assessment, and then you had the interview, How were those two things weighted? How did the chief finally make the recommendation to the town manager? And granted, the recommendation does come from the chief to the town manager for final confirmation by the council. And I don't want to micromanage the department, but I do want to avoid what took place 4 years ago. 4 years ago, we had a list that we didn't think we were going to get through. I think there were 6 individuals on that list, I believe at the time. 6, maybe 7. Okay, 7. So we had a list of 7 for 3 positions as lieutenant. We've already gone through those 3 individuals plus the entire list that was at that time. So I don't think anybody envisioned that the lieutenant would be leaving the department for whatever reason it was. So here we are, and I think at that time when we discussed it, we had all good, for those counselors that weren't here, and the new counselors, and a reminder to the previous counselors, the council did take a lot of time to talk about the hiring on the fire department because we had issues with the former chief in the hiring process. And the council worked very diligently with Chief Norman, I believe, to put down on paper how we were going to do the process for hiring of firefighters, because we knew there was a civil service process for police. How were we going to hire firefighters? And then the intention was to let's look at the promotional aspects of the department to make sure that whatever process the council adopts for the department was fair and equitable for every member. And unfortunately, other things transpired throughout those 4 years, and I think it did get put to the back burner because we had a lot of pressing issues. So I won't make a motion yet because I would like to hear other councilors' thoughts, but my recommendation would be that we refer this back to PPP to have a detailed discussion about this process to make sure, and I think there's a lot of new members on the department, but I know at the time there were a lot of members on the department that were upset about that process. And I think it would be wise of us to do further, and we do have a new town manager. Let's talk about some process to make sure that we have everything so everybody knows what's going on and we have a process that's fair to everybody. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilor Alonso.
Yes. I'm going to take a common sense approach. I'd rather see a more experienced person in the position. We understand this is a process that the chief has inherited, but at the same time I went out and did a little homework. I talked to one of the former chiefs and I explained, geez, is this good? Is this bad? It's a noble approach to widen the pool. But the thing is, does it better the pool? And when you have veteran Southbridge residents that are qualified for this position, and then all of a sudden you say, well, I'm going to make it only 3 years. Again, the process, it seems tainted. But for me, I think that when I talked with the former chief, I was just having a conversation, coffee. He said, just picture this, Scott. You're going to have a member of the fire department for 3 years. And if he's a member for 3 years, and how many fires did he have in that 3 years? He might have 1, 2, 3, or whatever, or a lot of small kitchen fires, something like that. Then you're going to throw a 3-year member of the fire department. Say the mill goes up. Say a bigger building goes up. The experience you garner from the 5 years to the 3 years is quite a bit in the field. So I took his word for that, and I sat back and said, why would you want to have less qualified people going for the management position when if you're 5 years, you have 2 years more of experience? So for myself, I don't have a lot of discussion, and I do know the department and the personnel. So for myself, I'm not going to support this, whether it goes back to subcommittee or whether it comes back here. I think we're in the right place at 5 years. If we were a bigger department with more men, I would even look to expand it to 7. So for myself tonight, I'm open for any discussion. I'd like to hear from the other councilors, but I could not support this. It's a step backwards. Thank you.
Councilor Adams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, as of right now, I can't support this, but I do recommend we go back to subcommittee to have a longer explanation and a conversation about this. You know, spending 26 years in the Marine Corps, we had young men and women that were just stellar, who went above and beyond their daily routine, and they were promoted pretty quickly. I saw E7s, if anybody that's a pay grade, a gunnery sergeant in the Marine Corps, hit the minimum of time in service of 12 years and became gunnery sergeants from staff sergeants. They moved up pretty quickly, and they were stellar. Now, that's fine if that's the way it worked, but sometimes they weren't. They were just good test takers, or they were good at school, or they were good at physical fitness. So I do believe wholeheartedly that experience does help bring about a better product, but I think we all have to be careful of what type of experience and history does that person bring to the table. So right now, if it were to go straight up or down, I would say no today, because I just don't have that explanation. I mean, I could read all this stuff, but I think it's more of a argument from or discussion from the town manager all the way to the chief and deputy chief. But I would prefer it go to the subcommittee for a further explanation. I will tell you, it's a double-edged sword, because I've seen it go both ways, where people were just stellar, and they were young. Even during the evaluation periods, we had individuals that had just been promoted to, let's just say, staff sergeant or gunnery sergeant, and I had lieutenants go, well, should I grade him higher than him because he was there longer? And I would say, who's the better of the two? Period. It doesn't matter. So another question I have, why not 4 years, not 4.5 years? Why does it have to go down to 3? I don't know. What happened with these, looks like 5 or 4 individuals that haven't stepped up to the plate, possibly, to fit get the minimum qualifications? That kind of brings up another issue. But that being said, I'd recommend it going back to go to the subcommittee. But if that doesn't pass, then I would definitely vote no today. Thank you.
Councilor Jovan.
I'll defer to Councilor Marquetti so he can make his point, and he may say something that I might have already.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman, through you. I would vote no as well. I think the chief says 7 members are available, 2 or 3 are qualified. I think that's a good number. 2 or 3 are qualified. That's plenty to pick from. So I would say at this point, no, I would vote no on this. Thank you.
Councilor Jovan.
Thank you, through you. Make no mistake, I mean, my point wasn't just the fact of 5 years. My point was, we had a process that was adopted by a previous council that was flawed, that had a lot of angst in the fire department, that was brought forward to us at that time. And shame on us for not addressing it and continuing to address it, but we did have precedent issues. The thought was, what is the process? Because the conversation that we had back then was, okay, an individual scored number 1 or 2 on the assessment, but interviewed, say 1 on the assessment, number 2 on the interview, and then it flipped. How does the chief and that town manager make the determination? What other factors are there? And let's put it down on paper so everybody knows what the process is when they go into this. That's the point of sending it back to subcommittee, because now we have the opportunity on a promotional exam to make sure that the entire department knows what their expectation is. That was number 1. Now, whether it's 3 years or 5 years, I will disagree to a point. A member that has 5 years of experience has 5 years of experience. But a member that has 3 years, let's also look at some of the additional things that they may have undertook under that 3-year period of time. You could have a 5 to 10 to 15-year-old employee that chose not to do any additional training, education, or anything else to further their career, but they have the magical 5 years. and they can test for it, but the individual that at 3 years went for their bachelor's degree, their master's degree, has X number of fires. So I do want to have that further discussion on years. How do we balance that? So that the entire department knows what the expectation is. We also found what the process was, and never mind. That's my point. We have an opportunity to make sure that we do this so that the entire department knows what the expectation when they apply for it. And I guess I will say, because the former town manager, when it came to the deputy chief's position, did a process without the entire department knowing how the deputy chief, and it's no slight on the deputy chief because we have one of the best in the state. But the rest of the department didn't know that if they applied for the chief's job and went through the assessment, at that point, they had concerns about whether I want to be a chief, but maybe they wanted to learn how to be a deputy chief and had the qualifications to be chief, but didn't know they could apply for it. This is what our job is, to make sure that we fix processes. And that's the reason for me asking it to go back to subcommittee. Thank you.
Councilor Hazel.
With all due respect to the previous speaker, what we're trying to stop here is politics. I've lived in this town my whole life. I've seen how it operates. We appoint people to positions that are not qualified, or we fix it so the person gets it. Okay? That's the issue the previous speaker was talking about. And then at one point, we were going to ask our on-call fire department to have firefighter 1 and firefighter 2. So we basically killed our call department. Our call department is something that a person wants to research and help firefighters that have fire 1 and fire 2. And maybe someday I want to be a firefighter and then I'll go to the academy. But when the criteria for firefighter 1 and firefighter 2 is at the auxiliary, but not at the chief's position when you appoint him. So when you turn things upside down like this, and I do agree with the previous speaker that the process is important to be laid out ahead of time. And that's why it's 5 years. So there was no shenanigans on appointments to come, to keep it where it is. And don't misunderstand this. This is only one piece of the criteria to be a lieutenant. There might be a test. There might be an interview. How you weight the experience and how you weight the college background or whatever the educational background is, or the interview process, I've seen the interview process outweigh everything in the past, and the person got the job. And then the next appointment was done differently. Where I really agree with the previous speaker is, whatever's being laid out is laid out and done. I know people, Southbridge people that live in this town, that under the 5-year criteria, puts them pretty much up front with 20 years experience. But if you turn around and say, no, we'll make it 3 years, then it all of a sudden draws in other people to the bottom. The bottom, not the top. So we can twist the words, we can talk about whatever it is. I wouldn't change this with all the discussion in the world. There's no substitution for experience. And 5 years is a minimum criteria, and I think that's a fair criteria for a lieutenant. So that's just my opinion. If you all want to go back to subcommittee and mix the words around to make it come out right, we can do that. Thank you.
Councilor Jovan.
Through you. To the previous speaker, that's my intent, is to avoid the politics, because we're keying in on the 3 to 5, but the rest of this document says there will be an assessment, there'll be an interview. There's no other information that says, upon the interview, this is how it's scored, this is the weighted procedure. Are we going to do that? Do other departments do that? That is the reason for it. I'm not hung up on the 3 to 5 years. I'm talking about the entire process to fix it now. And if you believe that this is the great way to go, then I would support 5 years, whoever has 5 years, let's pick the best candidate out of those that have 5 years, if that's the case. My point tonight is to make sure that we refer this back to look at the entire document to make sure that we're making the best decision and everybody in the department knows what the expectation is going forward, not just for this appointment period, but for the next 10, 15, 20 years. Thank you.
Councilor Adams.
Thank you. I just want to make note that I think this is bigger than 3 or 5 years or whatever it may be. I think this is a perfect opportunity for this town council to help out a little bit with this process. So that's the reason why I wouldn't mind it going to the PPP. Thank you.
Councilor Lazo.
I would urge councilors to vote tonight on this because the process isn't in front of us. It's not in front of us. If you want to talk about the process, request it and we'll get the chief in and we'll talk about the process. But what's in front of us is a piece of the process. So what I'm saying is, I stay with the 5 tonight. And then if you want to go back and talk about the process, that's a whole different subject. This is part of the process. I'm not going to dress it up. I'm going to call it what it is. I think it's unfair to all the veteran firefighters to drop it to 3. That's all I'm saying. Now, I didn't mention the process, although I do agree with the previous speaker. He's 100% right. People in the past have played with the process. We don't want that. We want the process to be laid out on a fair, level playing field for all firefighters within the realm of that 5 years. The question in front of us isn't the process. The question in front of us is the 5-year part of the process. I say we vote it tonight and send the mandate back to the department that we want the most experienced person. Thank you.
Councilor Jovan.
With all due respect to the previous speaker, 3 to 5 is the process. The department's trying to change the process. They're trying to change the number of years, which is part of the process. You want to take a motion tonight to just and I'm not going to get into a debate over the floor. This is why we do things in subcommittee, so that we can have these conversations. This is a process question. We are changing the process in which we appoint a lieutenant. He can dress it up in any way that he wishes to send a mandate to the department that it's bottom line 5 years. The motion before us tonight is to adopt a change to a voted on document that is the process for promotion of lieutenant. So we're going to take a motion. If the previous speaker wants to take a vote to say, hey, I support 5 years, then the chief can just post the job and say it's 5 years, and then when he makes his recommendation to council for that individual, and then other councilors sit here and say, wait a minute, I'm not happy with the process. I wanted an assessment. I wanted to know what the interview was. Let's waste another 20 minutes arguing whether 3 to 5 years instead of just kicking it back to his subcommittee to have a duly vetted discussion. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilor Adams, then Councilor Lazo.
Make a motion to move this question.
Second.
We have a motion to move the question. I believe we need to vote on that.
Can't hear you.
Excuse me, through you, point of order, Mr. Chairman. The councilor shouldn't address another council with that kind of language. Thank you.
Roll call.
Councilor Marquetti?
No.
Councilor Ryan?
Yes.
Councilor Steves?
Yes.
Councilor Adams?
Yes.
Councilor Catrona?
Yes.
Councilor Daniel?
Yes.
Councilor Dow?
Mr. Chair, that's to move the question, not to vote on it, correct? Right.
What's that mean?
Yes.
Councilor Jovan?
Yes.
And Councilor Lazo?
No.
All right, the question is moved. All right, we have before us now a motion to move. Do we have a motion and a second to move to refer?
Move the question means vote on the main question.
Vote on the main motion.
Vote on the main question, okay. Let's vote on the main question, roll call.
Councilor Ryan?
No.
Councilor Steves?
No.
Councilor Adams?
No.
Councilor Catrona?
No.
Councilor Daniel?
No.
Counselor Dow?
No.
Counselor Jovan?
Yes.
Counselor Lazo?
No.
And Counselor Marquetti?
No.
Motion fails.
Mr. Chairman, just to follow up, if we are requesting a agenda item on the PPP to talk about the process, not part of the process, I would be in favor of that. You're the chairman and you talk to the chief.
Very good. Item number 14, vote to accept a $500 donation from Southbridge Italian Club to be used at the fire chief's discretion for the fire department.
So moved.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Chief?
We received a donation recently from the Southbridge Italian Club. I'd like to get this approved and accepted through the PPP subcommittee, which Councilor Lazo has pushed forward to council tonight, and use at my discretion for either training or equipment purposes.
Any discussion?
I'll be abstaining from this motion as I'm a member of the Lions Club. Oh, never mind, it's the Italian Club. I'm not a member there, thank you. Lazo's got me all wound up now.
Roll call.
Counselor Steves?
Yes.
Counselor Adams?
Yes.
Counselor Catrona?
Yes.
Counselor Daniel?
Yes.
Counselor Dow?
Yes.
Counselor Jovan?
Yes.
Counselor Lazo?
Yes.
Counselor Marquetti?
Yes.
And Counselor Ryan?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, everybody.
Item 15, vote to approve that the Board of Health pursue the fiscal year 23 Recycling Dividends Program, IDP grant, through the Sustainable Materials Recovery Program to be used to support recycling programs for the town of Southridge, and authorize the town manager to sign all related documents.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Chairman, I apologize. This was the item. The Cultural Council was also an item, but this item also was brought to me by the town hall. It did not go to the EHS. Came here. This is a regular grant that we apply for all the time. They asked me to send it directly up, and I did. Thank you.
Very good. Any discussion? Very good. Roll call.
Counselor Adams?
Yes.
Counselor Catrona?
Yes.
Counselor Daniel?
Yes.
Counselor Dow?
Yes.
Counselor Jovan?
Yes.
Counselor Lazo?
Yes.
Counselor Marquetti?
Yes.
Counselor Ryan?
Yes.
Counselor Steves?
Yes.
Very good. Motion passes. Item 16, vote to confirm the adoption of Mass General Law, Chapter 140, Licenses, Section 151A, issuance of warrant to officers, duties, confinement of dogs, allowance for care, records.
So moved.
Second.
The two items presented tonight is just what was recommended by our legal counsel for the town to adopt. It's the Massachusetts general law that I've been already following. It would just be nice to have it backed up by the town council and adopted by our bylaws. It's just basically giving a summary of the town is giving me the authority to capture and seize any unlicensed dogs, any unleashed dogs, any unrestrained dogs, any dogs that are not licensed in the town. And then the second item for the animal control agenda for tonight, it's actually just the warrant and the lettering itself that would need to be signed by the chair, I believe, or the town manager. That's what I have for tonight. I'm sure there's going to be questions regarding this.
Discussion? Councilor Marquetti.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. I was just wondering, why did legal counsel recommend this?
We had some pushback from citizens regarding what authority that I would have if I picked up a stray dog that was on the streets as a public safety issue. I'm allowed to under the Mass General Law. That's presented tonight. It was just to also help with confirming that the town is giving me the permission to be the animal control officer in the town. It also outlines my responsibilities of documenting all of the animals that I have in my possession, where they go, and the disposition of them. If there's any fines or fees that were collected, they are recorded and brought to the appropriate places, like the town clerks, the town treasurers, and therefore all that. I have to keep records for 2 years. The first item outlines that job description in that MGL as well.
So before this, you were doing all these things anyway, but we weren't doing it, what, legally? Or we do have a leash law, so I would imagine you could pick up a dog if it's not on a leash.
So I'm certified as an animal control officer through the Massachusetts Animal Control Association, so I can follow what's under the MGL.
I see. Yeah.
Under our town bylaws, I don't have this authority outlined in our town bylaws. So it would just make everything cohesive in regards to bylaws and town state law.
All right, thank you.
Can I speak to that,
Chief?
Mr. Chair?
Certainly.
Good evening. Just quickly, because Caitlin might not be familiar with some of the historical background on this. Several years ago, a previous town council, legal counsel, we recommended that we adopt this MGL, both of these MGLs before you tonight. They had said just by the town appointing Caitlin as the animal control officer, she had the authority to conduct all these duties. Our new legal counsel, new town manager, that's why we're here now, just to kind of lock it all down so there's no question to it. So she's been operating under, because she's appointed by the council every year, every 3 years. But we've been told just to make sure that you're doing it correctly and properly. You can do it under the straight ACO nomination by the council, but this just firms it all up. So one attorney had a different interpretation than another attorney, and we're going with what our new attorney's telling us, is what it comes down to.
I'm all set, thank you.
Great. Anyone else?
Mr. Chair, Council Dow.
Go ahead, Councilor Dow.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. So if we approve that tonight, she still has to come before the town council, or she can just go and her own and do the thing what she's supposed to do with no permission from the town council?
Do you want me to answer that, Mr. Chair, or? Yeah.
Did you understand what he said?
No, I did. Well, I guess my question, and I could be wrong, Council Dow's asking if Caitlin now has the authority to just go out and seize dogs without going through the council for permission, but in here it says the chairman has to issue that directive and the council would have to vote on it. So nothing would change. We'd still have to come before council. Does that answer your question?
Should be an interpreter.
Councilor Ryan?
Audience is saying the same thing.
Thank you. Again. This one and the next one were unanimously by subcommittee. Thank you.
Anyone else? Councilor Lazo?
Just a quick, keep up the good work. You're doing a hell of a job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Very good roll call.
Counselor Adams?
Yes.
Counselor Catrona?
Yes.
Counselor Daniel?
Yes.
Counselor Dow?
Yes.
Counselor Jovan?
Yes.
Counselor Lazo?
Yes.
Counselor Marquetti?
Yes.
Counselor Ryan?
Yes.
And Counselor Steves?
Yes.
Motion passes. Item number 17, vote to confirm the adoption of Mass General Law, Chapter 140, Licenses, Section 153, form of warrant to officers.
So moved.
Second.
ACO?
What's in front of you regarding the warrant is actually the lettering that's giving me the authority after it gets signed with the date and the signature on it. And it's an annual warrant that would have to be issued every single year.
Any discussion?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Marquetti?
I think this
Councilor
also went
Marquetti.
through general government.
Yeah.
This went through general government.
Oh, my mistake. I'm sorry. Counselor Ryan, I apologize.
Yeah, this and the last one, recommended unanimously.
I apologize to you for that. That's my mistake. Anyone else? Roll call.
Counselor Catrona?
Yes.
Counselor Daniel?
Yes.
Counselor Dow?
Yes.
Counselor Jovan?
Yes.
Counselor Lazo?
Yes.
Counselor Marquetti?
Yes.
Counselor Ryan?
Yes.
Counselor Steves?
Yes.
And Counselor Adams?
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chief. Item number 18, vote to approve the amendment to the tie-in bond design contract for the West Street Infrastructure Improvements Project design to include Amendment 1 for a multiple-use path from Main Street to the West Street School entrance. The amendment will cost an additional $12,000 with funding from Chapter 90, project $64,000.
So moved. Second it.
Very good. Councilor Marquetti.
Thank
I'm
you.
sorry,
This one-
Councilor Adams.
Thank you,
I
Mr. Chair.
apologize.
Through you, this was voted 3-0 in favor. I'm bringing it up to the town council. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Heather.
Good evening. Trying to remember. Last meeting, you guys approved the Complete Streets program to be submitted to Mass DOT. And we spoke about the multi-use path that would be going up West Street that would also service for the grant application. This is to do the design to incorporate it into our West Street plans at this time. I spoke about West Street being already basically at 100%. These are so we can modify the plans. Originally, the plan just had one sidewalk. This will be a extra wide path, 10 feet wide, going up the side West Street where currently there isn't a sidewalk. So this is the design portion of that project.
Very good. Discussion. Councilor Adams, then Councilor
I'll
Marquetti.
let Councilor Marquetti.
Councilor
please.
Marquetti.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councilor Adams. Through you, Mr. Chairman, this is a multi-path, a multi-use path on West Street from the West Street, starting at South Street, I believe, and going all the way to, the multi-use is at the parking lot, but the rest of the street does need some work, and I agree. I have taken a ride on West Street, and I look at it, and it definitely needs the work that is going to be done up there. But this multi-use path, it has its advantages, but it also has some disadvantages. First of all, this is going to be a 10-foot wide path built on the north side of West Street, so it would most likely cause the street to be narrowed because there really is no room to expand on there's a brick wall right there that goes all the way down. The DPW director has stated that parking would be eliminated on that side of the street, and I've talked to a few residents that pick their kids up down there when they're letting school out. It's a very busy time between 2:30 and 3:30, and that's where they park their cars, on that side. So if you're eliminating parking on that side, I guess now they're going to have to park on the other side of the street, and the kids will have to cross West Street. There's also obstacles to the path. I mean, like I said, the brick wall, some areas of that brick wall actually have bricks standing up on them, so to me that creates kind of a hazard for somebody riding a bike there. So probably going to have to do some fencing there to stop them from going over that brick wall. I know that on the other side of the brick wall there's a steep drop-off, so this is all going to add to the cost. There's a drop-off down to the river in the woods. There's a drop-off to a parking lot. There's some kind of a stone structure down there. I don't know what that is. It's kind of a interesting looking, looks like an old water pump reservoir or something.
It is.
There's residents and a business right on the existing sidewalk. So again, the whole thing is going to have to come into West Street. There's a Center of Hope, Worcester County Social Services right there. The old fire station, there's no parking on that side, so anyone who parks on the other side won't be allowed to park there. I have seen some cars parked there to go into the pizza place. So the first time you brought this up, you said that this is a path for the pedestrians to be able to ride bikes to and from the school, to parks and trails, and also to connect with a proposed rail trail project that would extend from Crane Street to River Street and then to Mill Street. That was the first time I heard this. But as we all know, Mill Street is a one-way street going the opposite direction. So if you're going to bring a bike path up that street, you would be going against the traffic, which I don't think Mass DOT they don't recommend something like that. So then I watched the meeting that you just had, and you mentioned that there's a bike path on Main Street coming from the direction of Southbridge. So I took a ride over there, and there is a marking on the street. It's right in the traffic lane. I don't really see anybody using that. When Green Meadows first proposed coming here and locating on Mill Street, I did recommend that we look at that whole section because I knew there was going to be more traffic in that area, and there is a lot of traffic in that area. And I recommended that we take a look at it and possibly widening that area of Main Street to allow for a bike path or a wider sidewalk there, and for traffic, cars to pass each other, especially at Pleasant Street where you can't get around someone. And I was assured there was going to be a traffic study, but to date I've seen no traffic study on that area. Then there's the problem of at the end of Mill Street, you come to the Main Street intersection where you have multiple streets all converging on one intersection. So there's going to have to be some designs done with that intersection. I know Councilor Steves had mentioned that it's a very dangerous intersection, and it really is. So this is going to add more to it, and I think that before you undertake this, there should be some looking into this and planning on what you're going to do with that intersection. I would say just looking at what Mass DOT recommends, I will stop in a minute, that you will have to move that island because you don't want cars taking that quick turn onto West Street. It's dangerous there. So you don't want to have them crossing over to the island and then over to the gas station and then over to Mill Street. So it's all going to have to be in some sort of plan, which so far, all we're doing here is saying, let's add a bike path and not even thinking about what the rest of it's going to be. So I understand. I don't have a problem with the path, but I would want to see more planning before I would vote to go along with this, because I just don't see where that bike path is leading to. It's basically a path to nowhere at this point. So that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Adams.
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Very good. Councilor Lazo.
I agree with Councilor Marquetti. I don't understand why they're going down Mill Street, but I thought if you continued
We're not talking about the main bike path. We're concentrating only on West Street. I think everybody's kind of getting confused with the grant and what this is. This is just for West Street design.
Okay.
We're not designing Mill Street. That would be the design that would go with the big overall grant. We're just trying to address West Street right now.
Because I think it would behoove the town not to go straight down Crane, left on Pleasant, and then they run into that other bike path coming into Southbridge on Main Street. And you would be on main drags instead of those tighter streets where the trucks go into the mill. But that's something we can discuss later. Thank you.
So I do want to just point out a few things. The original West Street design, what we proposed with CDBG money and to redesign West Street, which is one of our poorest streets in town, a street that's serviced by a school, already had a sidewalk on that side, a 5-foot sidewalk. It already was going to take parking away on that side because we were only going to have a 5-foot apron. What this multi-use path change is doing, so the original design had a sidewalk, had the same sidewalk that is going to be there, just not as wide. What we're doing is taking a 5-foot pedestrian sidewalk and making it a 10-foot multi-use path. We already were planning to take parking away. We already understood that there was going to be impacts to the school. The school still sees the bigger benefit from having the sidewalk for the kids to walk on both sides of the road, improved pedestrian ways. And they also see the benefit of having a bike path in that area so their kids can ride a bike to school in a safe fashion, not in a travel lane. It is in complete agreement with that complete streets policy that the council just endorsed. Yes, there is a fence, there is a high wall there. Yes, we're going to have to look at what we can do. We don't own that wall. That is not town property. Most of it. There's parts of that area that are owned by the town. What you described of that big structure and what you weren't sure what that was, that is a part of the old dam structure that broke in 1955. It was a water control structure. That whole area used to be underwater. It was part of the mill system. There's a residence that has a driveway. We'll have to accommodate that. There's one telephone pole that will have to be relocated. We will have to work with National Grid on that. There are some parking spots that are used by the school department that we're going to have to find a different location. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be planning for our overall future. If we really think that this bike path is what we need and we're going to connect it from wherever in Crane and however we design it to get over there and cross that intersection to where we are on West Street, we have the opportunity to build it now and incorporate it into our project. If we ever wanted to go back in 2 or 3 years, the cost would be twice as much. We have to try to look at some of the things that we can do step by step and go for them as we're going. It has a benefit as a sidewalk. It has a benefit as a bike path. You're connecting to an existing path that's already there that can be improved to be a bike path and get right into Westville. You're connecting it to the school. We are going to do the 5-foot sidewalk and take away the parking anyways. Yes, it's going to make school pickup time a little bit more hectic, and we may have to work with the schools about how they do it. But at this point, we have to work in the confines of what we have, and we'll work, if we get the grant, on how to get the bikes to West Street. Whether we're going, that is State Road, that is up on Pleasant Street, which has a whole different level of issues, and maybe we still come down Pleasant Street and get on State Road for a little bit. But it's a different set of problems when we start dealing with the state. So I hope I've responded to most of your questions. I tried to.
Councilor Marquetti.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you, you know and I know that young children don't use Main Street to get to West Street schools. So
Yes, they do.
I highly doubt that they go on Main Street right there because you have a good chance.
I know they do because we clean sidewalks just so that we can make sure they get there.
All right, well, Main Street is not safe, I'll tell you right now, and you know you're going to have to do something with that intersection. So there's going to be more change orders coming after this.
Not for this project.
I would say that you're going to have to do something down there. So that's it. Thank you.
Anyone else? Roll call.
Counselor Daniel?
Yes.
Counselor Dow?
Yes.
Counselor Jovan?
Yes.
Counselor Lazo?
Yes?
Counselor Marquetti?
No.
Counselor Ryan?
Yes.
Counselor Steves?
Yes.
Counselor Adams?
Yes.
And Counselor Catrona?
Yes.
Motion passes. Item number 19, vote to approve change order number 1 with J.H. Lynch for the emergency water main repair at Dudley River Road and Dresser Hill Road. The change order amount is $8,104.75 for a final contract value of $46,654.75. This change order will be paid from account number 610-450.583-000.22580, Water Capital Systems account.
So move.
Second.
Councilor Adams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is voted 2-1 in favor of, with a positive recommendation up to the town council.
Thank you. Heather?
So we had done emergency contracts quotes with multiple contractors, including getting daily rates. We had an estimated number of days in there. We asked for them to give us an hourly rate in case they had to stay late, and we asked for a per ton price. So this is just to reflect what actually was done out there, the number of days they were there. They had one day they had to stay late to finish up, so that 1 hour is in there. And then there's a negative change order for the amount of asphalt to reflect exactly how much asphalt was there. it's a quantities bid type of price, basically to reflect the actual number of days, which is what they gave us a price on, hours and tons of asphalt.
Any discussion? Councilor Catrona?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you, as I stated at subcommittee, and I'll say it again, I think the local paving, the original contractor, I feel strongly, should be responsible for this. Quite a few paving trucks drove over this pipe and stuck approximately 3 to 4 inches out of the ground. It was that way for months. Whether the pipe was broken at the stem or was broken 30 feet up the road, it certainly hindered that pipe from breaking. For that reason, I feel very strongly that the town should not be responsible for this. I think our DPW director should seek reimbursement from the original contractor. Coincidentally enough, Mitchell just happened to be the low bidder on this to get the job, and I'd like to know who and how to determine that this pipe was not the fault of the original contractor. I did not ask that question to subcommittee at the time, but I'm asking it now. Thank you.
We attempted to fix the pipe in-house with our own forces, Water Department and DPW. We uncovered the pipe, determined where the break was, and from their knowledge of how pipes break and what happened here, it appeared that the fittings actually corroded. It wasn't a clean break of like a break in a pipe. It was a corroded where the pipes had separated. So they did not believe it was the fault of the previous contractor. It was more of an issue with how it was put together 30, 40 years ago than anything else.
Very good. Councilor Marquette. Go ahead, Councilor Catrona.
Just to follow, I will not be supporting this. It's for the reasons I mentioned earlier. I feel the town should not be responsible for this. Thank you.
Very good. Councilor Marquette.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would say that it didn't help much that those pipes and valves were sticking up out of the ground, because I went over there too and I saw a lot of trucks driving over those. So maybe that wasn't the cause, but it sure didn't help much. It seems to me that this would be a good use for ARPA funds. I don't see why we can't use some
We
of
already
that.
cover pipe breaks in the budget, so we don't need to incur ARPA funds. So
All right. So, but
it's already
I would
in our
just say
current budget.
I would agree with Councilor Catrona, but unless we're willing to go to court over this, we're just going to have to pay it. I don't know if it's worth going to court,
We wouldn't win.
over this. But I do have to agree with Councilor Catrona. He has a good point. I mean, those pipes were left up out of the ground all summer long.
If I saw a break right out of valve, in the valve stem, and the valve broke off, I
All
would
right.
be more inclined to try to fight it at that point.
Okay.
But that's not what we've found.
All right, thank you.
Anyone else? Very good. Roll call.
Counselor Dow?
No.
Counselor Jovan?
Yes.
Counselor Lazo?
Yes.
Counselor Marquetti?
Yes.
Counselor Ryan?
Yes.
Counselor Steves?
Yes.
Counselor Adams?
Yes.
Counselor Catrona?
No.
And Counselor Daniel?
Yes. Motion carries. Thank you, Heather. Item number 20, amendments to Southbridge bylaw by adding section 3-110, adjudicatory hearing absence by voting member, first reading February 7th, 2022. I'll read it because Council Ryan is away right now. Section 3-110, adjudicatory hearing absence by voting member. 3-110.1, establishment. Adoption of Mass General Law, Chapter 39, Section 23D, the Mullen Rule. Town Council voted to adopt Mass General Law, Chapter 39, Section 23D, the Mullen Rule, at its regular Town Council meeting, September 27, 2021. 3-110.2, applicability of the Mullen Rule. No member of any multiple member board, committee, or commission of the town shall be disqualified from voting on any matter due to said member's absence from no more than a single session of any public hearing at which testimony or other evidence is received, provided, however, that no individual shall invoke this exemption more than 3 times per calendar year. 3-110.3 Procedure. Upon missing a session of a public hearing, the voting member shall review all material and evidence presented and discussed during the missed session of the public hearing, including but not limited to an audio or video recording of the session. Upon review of the evidence, the member shall complete an affidavit of compliance on a form provided by the town manager's office, certifying under the pains and penalties of perjury the member's compliance with this bylaw. 3-110.4 Records. The original affidavit shall be placed in the file for the subject of the public hearing and shall be kept as part of the official record of the proceedings. Copies shall be filed in the offices of the town manager and town clerk. The affidavit and any other supporting documents and recordings shall be maintained as required by the Secretary of State's Massachusetts Records Retention Schedule. 3-110.5 Quorum. Nothing in this bylaw shall change, replace, negate, or otherwise supersede applicable quorum requirements, and under no circumstances will the absent member be counted toward a quorum.
So move.
Just a reading. It's just a reading.
Just a reading?
Just a reading.
You don't accept the
That's the
first reading, okay.
Yep. Okay, all set? Very good. 21. Item 21, discuss COVID-19 update and take any action thereof. Mr. Manager?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I gave a brief review of the numbers from Mr. Pelletier. I think the only thing that I would ask of the council is to make a determination. I'm not sure if your standing order for the last 2 meetings is up tonight or not, whether or not you're going to continue with hybrid or remote. As I indicated, Mr. Pelletier was thinking he would have more information to make a decision or recommend to me to lift the mask mandate by the 28th because the trends are going down. So I will review the information he has and make a recommendation or send an email out on or about the 28th about the mask mandate. But I think, if memory serves me correct, you were going to revisit whether or not to keep your hybrid meetings or remote or however you want to conduct meetings this evening. I'd have to double check, but I think that's what this would be, the appropriate time to either renew that or do away with it.
Councilor Marchetti.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have to agree with Councilor Jovan. It's very difficult to hear them up there. Sometimes it's too loud. It's garbled. So I don't think it's a problem with doing it hybrid. I just think it's a problem with the technology. For some reason, we don't have a good setup here. Maybe the speakers are blown. I don't know what it is, but I do have a hard time hearing them as well. I will say this, though. I think that the law is expiring. April 1st, we have to go back to full meetings anyway. So maybe we should just let it alone for now and wait till April 1st. But definitely, okay, but anyways, I do have a hard time hearing it, so you got to do something with the speakers, I think. Thank you.
Councilor Adams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. So I pulled up the law, what they're saying. And one of the specific things in here, and because it's a hybrid, remote works one way, in-person works one way, hybrid seems to work on its own way. I think there's an echo chamber in here. I think people at home can't hear it. We're getting blasted by those from the remote side, but at the same time, people can't hear them speak because it's echoing so bad, not only just for us, but for the people at home. They said it's ridiculous. You can't hear anything they're saying. So one of the things is what requirements apply to remote meetings like this, because this is considered a hybrid, and members of the public must be clearly audible to each other and to members of the public at all times. So if there's a remote meeting and let's say internet goes out, the chair of that committee, subcommittee, board, whatever may has to make a decision at that point in time, may have to call it. But we've said it for 2 years that hybrid does not work here. Remote does, in a sense. We've been pretty good on that one, but we're allowing the people, when we have people come here and we have the council here, we allow people to speak, even though that's not a requirement in the remote meetings or anything, but we're giving the opportunity to the public to speak their piece up here. So I do have a motion on the table. I did look at this. You're right. April 1st comes around. It's expiring unless the governor decides to extend it some more. I don't think the council on a whole has because remote has been successful, should have the authority to say no more remote. But I do believe it should be left up to the committees, boards, commissions, and stuff like that. If the chair of each one wants to make a decision and say, we're going to do face-to-face, then we do face-to-face. If they want to go remote, then they go remote. But I don't think we should be going back and forth on voting consistently. But I do have a motion here, unless somebody else wants to speak into this. But we're getting blown away out here. We couldn't barely understand. I will say this, and nothing on Councilor Steves, but it's the first time I've heard him that clearly in a long time. But everybody else was just blowing our eardrums away. So, and then they had an alert going on. At the same time, you could hear the alert going. So obviously the audible portion you couldn't hear. And again, I say that the people aren't hearing it from home. So, unless somebody else would like to speak, but I do have a motion if anybody wants to hear it.
Council Jovan, then Council Lazo.
Thank you. Through you. I know I tried to participate in the council meeting of the whole the other evening, and I was told that nobody could hear any word I said, which is probably a good thing. Council Marquetti probably was happy they couldn't hear anything I said. But I didn't say anything bad about Council Marquetti. But no, and that was the reason I think I said at the beginning, we either do all remote or all in person. I understand the concerns about COVID. We lived it when we first came aboard. We did the best we could to allow our town government to operate the best that it could, and got a lot of things done with this hybrid approach. I think right now, and I do appreciate what Mr. Pelletier said earlier this morning, because I did participate in that meeting, about the numbers. They are coming down, but I think I also look at the community as a whole. Harrington Hospital has opened up so that they allow at least one visitor in the hospital right now. So they had gone from a complete closure to allowing at least a visitor. Our town hall has been operating, allowing people to come in and out as long as they wear masks. I don't think the town hall is saying right now, let's eliminate the mask mandate in the town hall. I would firmly agree with that if that's the way they go. However, I do believe we handle the business of the people. The people have the right to hear us clearly, and I think we need to hear people clearly as well so that we make the best decisions. City of Worcester tonight is taking upon it to eliminate all masks in their municipal buildings. The town of Charlton has eliminated all masks in their buildings effective, I think, next week or this week. I think we have to continue the best practices to stay safe. However, I'm inclined to whatever Council Adams' motion. I'll wait to hear it, but I don't think this hybrid approach is the right way for us to operate the government for the town of Southbridge. Thank you.
Council Lazo.
I don't think anybody should take COVID lightly. We learned a lot about it. We panicked like normal human beings when we first got hit with it. I think sometimes there was an overreaction to it, but it's here. It's not going away. It will be back next year. This thing is going to parallel influenza. Influenza kills, so doesn't COVID-19. Underlying issues, people that have problems. I know my mom had emphysema and COPD, and when somebody had a cold, we locked her down. We didn't lock down anything else but her in her home, and we were not allowed to visit her. I think now with the precautions that we know work and some that we're finding out that didn't work, I think we're going to be better off moving forward. Moving forward, I agree with the two previous councilors. Let's go back to full in-person. If you choose to wear a mask, I guess if there's a mandate at the town hall, I must have missed it. But anyways, I think we got to go back to normal, and I'm hoping that Councilor Adams' motion reflects that, where we go back. I didn't have a PPP subcommittee because I didn't want anybody to get COVID to the TV. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, Councilor Dow.
Councilor Dow, turn down your speaker a little bit, please. You're very, very loud.
Oh, that's good. So, we can continue one more reading to that town manager, Mr. Collector will refer regarding the number of open and, just for caution, I think we should do one more reading and the next meeting we'll decide if we go back fully in the town hall or we still have it. Thank you.
I believe he said he wanted to go one more week.
I couldn't hear him.
Yes. Mr. Chairman, my understanding, what I heard him say was he would like to continue this to the next meeting, doing the hybrid.
Okay. I'd like to take a moment to speak for myself. I'm sorry, Councilor Ryan, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For you, I personally am fine with getting rid of hybrid if we don't want to do that as hybrid for council chambers. But I do agree with Councilor Adams' suggestion of leaving it up to the subcommittee chairs and the chairs of the committees until April 1st. I mean, it's their jurisdiction anyway. Councilor Adams has already been voting this like crazy. At this point, with the numbers coming down, I feel more comfortable leaving it to the decisions of the individual chairs. Thank you.
Very good, Councilor Ryan, thank you. Councilor Adams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. Let me change this real quick. Make a motion to allow chairpersons of all boards, subcommittees, commissions, and committees, including the school board and town council, to decide whether to have remote in-person meetings, hybrid meetings being barred until the expiration of Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, general law, chapter 30 alpha, subsection 18.
Second.
Okay. Councilor Adams.
Just want to make clear the reason why I went into leaving the remote in there and leaving it to, obviously, it sounded like some people wanted for the chairpersons, was the fact that under Governor Baker's extension, June 16, 2021, it gives us a reasonable expectation to be able to hold remote meetings. But that being said, it should be left up to the chair. The reason why I'm saying hybrid meetings being barred, I just made a note, continued connectivity issues at each hybrid meeting, which does not allow clear audio to each other or the public at all times, which is one of the requirements to be in here. And I just leave it up to the chairs of each committee, subcommittee, and everybody else.
Any further discussion? Councilor Marchetti.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, through you. I would just like to point out one thing. As far as allowing people to speak at our meetings, that is in our charter. So doesn't matter to me what state says. In our charter, we allow citizens to address the town council. I would also like to say one more thing. I don't have a problem even meeting in the town hall, but I would like to choose where I meet, and I would rather meet right in this room, even with my subcommittee. If that's doable, then I'm good with it. Thank you.
Councilor Adams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's a very good point. And one of the things that they do address in here is the open meeting law does not require comments. With this law, it requires that it be, you could do YouTube. There can't be a 20-second delay when you're doing something online. The fact is, if we have a meeting in here, right here, you can speak at the podium. If you have a remote meeting, you can speak remotely. The open meeting law makes it very, very clear, and so does when we post our agendas online. It says everybody has an opportunity to call in or get on the video and speak.
Council Oslo.
Just a quick add-on to my previous statement. Another reason why I'd like to be in person is because I miss my buddy Joe Dow that sits on to the left of me, so he can come into the meeting personally and vote against everything that I vote on. Thank you.
I'd just like to say that as the chairman of a meeting, trying to run a meeting under these conditions has been extraordinarily difficult. I'm frankly having a hard time. It's difficult to understand what people are saying, and it's disruptive to my thought process. Not that, you know, I'm the great council leader that previous people have been. There's a long string of council chairs that I'm sure were wonderful, actually. But it's difficult for me. It's added difficulty for me, I'd like to say. And I don't look forward to the hybrid meetings by any stretch of the imagination. Any further discussion? Very good. Roll call.
Counselor Dow?
No.
Counselor Jovan?
Yes.
Counselor Lazo?
Yes.
Counselor Marquetti?
Yes.
Counselor Ryan?
Yes.
Counselor Steves?
Yes.
Counselor Adams?
Yes.
Counselor Catrona?
No.
And Counselor Daniel?
Yes. Motion passes. Council's forum. Agenda item number 22. Let's go with Council Lazo.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of quick things. Just to the town manager, I know people are seeing it. Main Street coming on to, from Hamilton on to Main. I know we're in the middle of winter. I know we paved the street during cool weather, but I think the pavement is letting go in most places where they cold rolled it instead of when it was really hot. So I think we're gonna maybe have to sit down with the paving company, make sure that the bond is still enforced. It's terrible. And I think we just should protect taxpayers. Main Street, a lot of work, a lot of money, a lot of headaches, but I think in the end it will be right, even if we have to go back to the contractor and have him repair some of the brand new road that's already falling apart. One of the things I just wanted to say is, and I don't want to beat a dead horse, having a meeting in public and having a meeting as councilors is so much more effective than hybrid or the other one. And I look at it as, you know, when you're at subcommittee and you're having an open debate and you have somebody coming in from the TV side, it just doesn't have the same impact at the meeting. So I'm glad that we voted that and we'll work it out. As far as the promotional thing, I want to bring that up. Mr. Jovan had a great point as far as the process. I would like, to and through you, to have that process pushed to the subcommittee as a whole process, not a part of it, to understand that all men have the same opportunity and not to have something changed in the fourth quarter. I think that would be really productive for the process and really good for the men. Thank you.
Very good. Councilor Marquetti.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I'd like to thank Councilor Adams for chairing my subcommittee. I had some difficult times with my family, and I really appreciate it. And and I also got the minutes today, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'd also like to say that I did receive an email last week regarding the charter review from Councilor Steves, and I think it was in regard to what a charter review committee can and cannot do. The point of his email was that only an elected commission can propose any change in the charter relating in any way to the composition, mode of election or appointment or terms of office of the legislative body, the mayor or city manager, or the board of selectmen or town manager. I had read this law before we even started talking about residency requirements, and just looking at it, I don't see how this has anything to do with residency requirements. So I just wanted to respond to that in an open meeting. Other than that, that's all I have. Thank you.
Very good. Councilor Jovan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, through you. As you're aware, as chairman of the EHS subcommittee, I've had conversations with Senator Fatman regarding setting up a meeting with the Commissioner of Education to come to, we're still finalizing the details of it, but that meeting with the Commissioner of Education is scheduled for March 9th. I do not have a time of day or location as of yet, but March 9th, we'll have a discussion with the Commissioner of Education about the receivership in the town of Southbridge and any discussion so that we can have a pretty robust discussion with him regarding receivership. Second thing, and I apologize to the town manager because I'm throwing this out tonight. It's nothing really bad, but it's, I'm not sure, we had a fire station building committee meeting on Wednesday, and we talked about siting of the overall design and then the outbuilding that will be put there for some ancillary equipment. And the fire chief had brought up, and I'm not sure where this might go to have a discussion with the town council first, but the fire chief had brought up, hey, on that outbuilding, what are the thoughts of possibly putting a restroom there for use by the fields? Because there are no restrooms there for any of the fields. So obviously that might be outside of the scope of the fire station project itself. But we're always a council that's what's next and what's best for Southbridge. We're doing a huge project down there for the park grants and all that. Would this be an opportunity for us to maybe site the building, that outbuilding in such a way that we do incorporate a restroom there for use by people that are down there while we're there? And then it got me to thinking, well, let's think a little bit more outside the box. Other communities that have events, Little League, softball tournaments and all that, have a concession booth within a town facility. Should we look at, while we're in design phase for that area, for recreational means, to do a combination, add on to that smaller outbuilding with a small restroom and perhaps a concession stand, because I know the Little Leagues were looking to do some kind of concession booth, and I know in other communities the town rents out that space to somebody to run that concession booth. So I'm not sure where that might go. I know it might cost the town some money on that end because it's not part of the project, but I'm just looking for some input of where we might have that conversation, whether people agree with it or not. If you don't agree with it, fine, we'll just continue to march on. But while we're doing a project, again, let's finish an area that might be beneficial for the overall recreational needs of the town of Southbridge. So I'm not sure where that might be go for, but it would be something that we would need to probably have a sooner than later discussion because we are talking about design. So perhaps we may have to look at, where'd that go? PPP? So I have Council Lazo throw it on PPP for a discussion. And then whether we decide or not, but I'm just thinking long term, it would be nice. I mean, we could have tournaments down there and nice facility that is multi-purpose. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Very good. Councilor Catrona.
Thank you.
Councilor Ryan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. I just wanted to follow up on that flashing beacon and the status of it on Main Street, the one that has the solar panel that's not working.
Yes.
I just wanted to know the status of it and of its repair or.
At this time, I don't have an updated answer. As some of you know, last town council meeting, I got some immediate action on a variety number of council forum requests. It was determined at that time, DPW did go down and look at that flashing rapid beacon. It was determined that the solar panel was not large enough to generate the necessary energy to recharge the battery, and that's why it wasn't working. The last update that I had for Councilor Ryan and the rest of the council was that they were working with the contractor to get a larger panel. I will put that on my list to do this week. I will get an update for you, Councilor Ryan, and I'll send it out to you and the rest of the council.
Thank you. I just figured, I think it was about a month ago I asked, so I figured I'd follow up. Thank you.
All set? Very good. Councilor Steves.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just two quick items. One is that to follow up on that whole MVP process, there's a Zoom hearing talking about basically how the process works on the 10th at 12 that I was planning on attending. As I've mentioned in the past, I'm interested in the process, so I do intend to get involved in it more directly, whether or not we formally vote, whether or not the council formally wishes to vote me as a representative, I would like to be involved anyway. And the other item is that I just wanted to let you all know that I sent a quick email regarding the promotional process for the fire department to the chairman, to Scott, to Councilor Lazo, and to the manager, passing on to other people for the or whenever we do have a discussion on that whole process. It's just a few things and connections to that. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Very good. Councilor Dow.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to say thank you for Councilor Lazo for thinking about me next time. But I think I'm voting yes with him tonight, so that's all. Thank you.
Boy. Councilor Adams, Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just for all those that are listening that's in here, Ms. Blakely stated be careful when you walk outside this evening. Pretty slippery. She threw some ice melt down, so be careful leaving for those that are here in the dais. And I don't have anything else. That's it. Agenda item number 23 is discussion of the next meeting, which will be Monday, February 28, 2022 at 7 p.m. here in the dais.
Very good. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Councilor Adams?
Yes.
Councilor Catrona?
Yes.
Councilor Daniel?
Yes.
Councilor Dow?
Yes.
Councilor Jovan?
Yes.
Councilor Lazo?
Yes.
Councilor Marquetti?
Yes.
Councilor Ryan?
Yes.
And Councilor Steves?
Yes.
We are adjourned.